Welcome everybody. Today, international webinar organized by Department of Journalism and Mass Communication, IQAC, Vijaygarh Jyotish College. Today's speaker, Dr. Nandana Bose from USA. I would like to request Dr. Priya Haldar, Assistant Professor, Department of Economics, moderate the program. Priya, please.
Thank you, Arnabda. Welcome everybody. Today's international webinar on female stardom and 1990s popular Hindi cinema. A very interesting topic indeed. Organized by VJRC 1-year Diploma Filmmaking, Department of Journalism and Mass Communication in collaboration with IQAC Vijaygarh Jyotish College. Today we have with us Dr. Nandana Bose, who is a film scholar, author and educator and former associate professor, Department of Film Studies, University of North Carolina, Wilmington, as the honorable speaker. And to introduce and welcome her, now I would like to request Dr. Urmi Roy, our social media officer, Vijaygarh Jyotish College, and also head of the Department of Botany of Vijaygarh Jyotish College, to kindly give her valuable welcome address to our honorable speaker and all our guests present here. Urmidi, please.
Thank you, Polashpriya, and thank you, Arnab, for this opportunity. Actually, today our principal ma'am was supposed to do this part, but because she is stuck in some administrative work at college, so I am to do her part over here. Firstly, I want to introduce Dr. Nandana Bose, today's speaker. She is a scholar and author of an educator, associate professor from University of North Carolina, Wilmington. I welcome you, ma'am, in this webinar and at this series and in these monotonous webinars of COVID-19. You will be giving us something that is out of that monotonous thought and, fear of living every day. So it will be very enchanting and enlightening for us to have some sort of this kind of topic to discuss about, and in this evening before the Mahalaya. And so we are expecting a lot from you. Welcome to our platform and hope we'll have a nice session from you. Over to you, Polashpriya.
Thank you. Thank you, Urmidi. And once again, we all welcome Dr. Nandana Bose to our online platform. And let me first introduce her a brief. Dr. Nandana Bose is a film scholar and author and educator and also former associate professor of University of North Carolina, Wilmington. And she is also the author of the monograph Madhuri Dixit, published by British Film Institute and Bloomsbury Academic. And she has published many referred international academic journals like Cinema Journal, Celebrity Studies, Feminist Media Studies, Velvet Light Trap, etc. And most recently in Economic Political Weekly and scholarly authologies such as Figurations in Indian Film, Behind the Scenes, Contemporary Bollywood Directors and Their Cinema, and most recently Indian Film Stars. She has also received many international awards and grants and is a member of Asian Media and Cultural Studies Network, the International Association for Media and History, and many others reputed membership she has. So I think, and today the topic is really very interesting and something different from our boring academic that we are having on day-to-day life. We are going through this very boring and very depressing phase. I hope today's topic will bring some fresh air in our depressed mind. So now I request Nandana Bose ma'am to kindly start your session and make us enjoy it. Thank you, ma'am. Nandana madam, please. Ma'am, are you here? I think your microphone is off. Like it
Yeah,
is.
ma'am, your microphone is mute. You have to unmute it.
Yeah,
Yes.
thank you very much for that very warm welcome. Thank you so much for this invitation. I will hope to take you to another starry realm during this lecture. Let's see. So I will speak on female stardom and 1990s popular Hindi cinema. I will begin by introducing my subfield of star studies, which has now expanded into celebrity and star studies. It may not have as much of a presence in Indian film studies in India, so I feel that I should begin with just mapping the field, the subfield rather, within Indian film studies. And then I'm happy to take questions about my lecture, or I'm also researching on streaming platforms, and also I teach or I used to teach new Korean cinema. So I'm happy to answer any questions that the students might have. So this is a very fertile and a vibrant field of star studies. As you can see from the slide, you see a large number of books that have been published on this field. We are anticipating very excitedly Professor Iyer's book, Dancing Women. And my book is sort of a precursor, a kind of one of the books on female stardom in Hindi cinema, and particularly my area is the 1990s, and in particular Madhuri Dixit. But these are some of the books and anthologies that have come out, have been published very recently in 2019 actually, and 2020, Indian Film Stars, which is an anthology of all Indian film stars, some who have not been recognized as such, stardom in contemporary Hindi cinema. So this is my book. This is a monograph, and this was only 40,000 words. Part of this Film Star series, where I'm analyzing stardom as a cultural phenomenon, and I'm kind of examining the cultural meanings of one particular star. And if you're familiar with the British Film Institute, they tend to be focused on Western film stars. They would like to be a little less Eurocentric. And so if you can see the other books that have been published in this series, it's on Elizabeth Taylor, Rock Hudson, Denzel Washington, very much Hollywood and American cinema. And they wanted a star from what is considered to be the largest film industry in the world, which is the Bombay film industry. And so there are two from the Bombay film industry who are part of the series. Madhuri Dixit should be the only female Asian female, and also Amitabh Bachchan, of course, who is probably overwritten. There is a surfeit of information on him. So this is the subfield, which is an extremely exciting, dynamic field. This is now within celebrity and star studies. Star studies usually focuses on actors and actresses who you can see on the screen. And celebrity studies is, a politician could be a celebrity, a sports person could be a celebrity. The celebrity field is much larger. Pop star is very much a celebrity. So it's not just stars, but my own contribution is towards Indian film stars. So the field, was shaped by a particular book. This was a path-breaking book. This is Richard Dyer's Stars. I highly recommend it if you are interested in the phenomenon of stardom. And we seem to be completely riveted by stardom because we have one of the most, established and dominant star systems in the world, which is, of course, the Bombay film industry, and the star system is also in various industries in the South as well. So Richard Dyer's Stars sort of shaped the kind of sub-discipline of star studies way back in 1979. And he talked about stars as images. So we are talking about what they represent on the screen, and not what they might be in reality. We have no interest in what they are in reality, but the perception of a certain kind of image and a representation. It is a presentation of some kind of, personality. But we are interested in images in terms of style, in terms of the performance, in terms of delivery of their diction, the sound, the accent, what they mean also culturally, what they mean. So star images have what, according to him, this is all quoting Dyer, structured polysemy that enables multiple interpretations. It means that we all have stars are very open-ended texts. We look at stars as texts, like you look at novels as texts. You can read them in various different ways. There are various signs which we can pick up. So they have multiple meanings. So therefore, a star can mean a certain thing in a particular, in a particular region, in a particular milieu, in a particular era, and those stars. Images might change over a period of time. They may not last. They may not be evergreen. And also, one star elicits large number of meanings and contradictions as well. Keep in mind that that is what is so fascinating about stardoms, and certain stars also are, there might be certain stars that are very polarizing, that some people absolutely adore and find great meaning in their existence, and some that divide, and are not, that only remain in a particular period and do not have the longevity of stars like Amitabh Bachchan or the person in question, Madhuri Dixit. So they have remember there are multiple interpretations, and this is of course not an exact science at all. So, you can interpret the significance of a star, the importance of a star, what a star actually embodies. And then often fans and critics and the public can project their own desires, their own aspirations, and, lack maybe onto a star. So a star's life might become extremely interesting because it's a kind of an escapism, or it's a kind of a distraction maybe. So they are all embodiments of ideological contradictions, is what Dyer says in this path-breaking book called, The Stars in 1979. Some of the key questions, this is just one main question, is that what separates the stars from the rest? What are the factors that make a star and determine the trajectory of somebody's career? There are so many who never become stars, or they become stars for a certain period of time, but they don't have that kind of life, a kind of a shelf life. And it's different in terms of gender, it's different in terms of race, it's different in terms of class, caste, national identity. So there are various ways, various parameters in which one can analyze film stars. And the difference between stars and character actors, because some character actors will never become really stars. So that's sort of one of the very, very basic and fundamental questions about this field, this subfield. Some of the key concepts because I'll be referring to it, and I do talk about it in my book, star persona and star image. So there is a difference between these two concepts. Persona actually refers to a very carefully crafted and consolidated public projection of a star based on the film roles and the media appearances of that star. So to a greater extent, the persona is a certain kind of a configuration which the star has more control over. The image is much wider, it's a much broader concept, and it includes not just the amalgamation of star roles and certain personal traits and things like that, but it also includes publicity, any kind of thing that is circulated in the public, publicity, promotional material, particularly reviews, film reviews, and in the period that I'm talking about, it's usually newspapers and film magazines. And then later on, towards the later half of her career, it's more, you can see them on social media and things like that. But it's basically a publicity and reviews from critics, fans, public, and and the critics and the stars and the fans and the public kind of projecting some of their aspirations, aims, goals, desires onto that star. So the image is not something that the star can control as much, because then that becomes, it is a shared kind of a realm where you share it with the people who are writing about you, and it might be quite critical. So these are two very fundamental concepts of all studies that you read in the scholarly world and the academic world, not in the layman's kind of, not in the newspapers as such. and social media. Publicity and promotion also, there is a dire distinguishes between these two concepts. Publicity is all the reviews, everything that is promoted in the public domain, which could be posters and reviews, and before it used to be lobby cards and billboards. All of that, it could be negative publicity, it could be publicity that has been planted, all of that. But promotion is something which is much closer to a studio, because his research was mostly Hollywood. So the studio-based system, how the studio promoted through various means. Again, I mentioned circulation of certain kind of interviews, which are very carefully controlled by the studio. Here, it would mean some companies, some film production companies that have, like Yash Raj, say, they would be promoting of a certain star, but it would be far more controlled by the production company, and it would not be left to the outer domain of critics and publicizers and media handlers and all of that. And off-screen, on-screen image, that's another key concept, because I use that a lot to explain Madhuri's kind of appeal over a period of time, that she has, is like a kind of, as we know, and but I discern a kind of a split in her on-screen persona and off-screen and on-screen. There is a certain kind of a dichotomy or a duality, which I believe is fundamental to her everlasting appeal. If she's 50 years old and and still very much in the public domain, and has given careers of women of a certain age a completely different trajectory, and opened up large number of possibilities, which other female stars are also doing, but many of them are younger now. Okay, so these are the conditions for the emergence of stardom, and we can see that how we meet all of those conditions. But of course, Hollywood and America did that in the 1920s and 30s. Capitalist economy, industrial organized society, mass culture. There has to be something where you can proliferate these images of the stars, and then it's taken on a completely different life of its own with social media. So in the era of new media technology, obviously they're on Instagram or they're on Twitter. There are all of these managers handle their profile and how they want to try and create a certain for themselves, and then also kind of an image, as much as they can control it. So mass media technology has to be there. So you have these the reproduction of a star's image over and over again, or just their features, how they look, there's some of their attributes, like the certain smile or certain gesture or certain way in which they the mannerisms, their tics and all of that. So, and then there is so much of just analysis of analyzing star quality. What is star quality? So you'll have quite a bit of scholarship on star quality. What is it about this star that makes him or her so appealing or attractive, or is a box office success? You have the picture of Greta Garbo, and it was her mystique, her kind of her enigmatic kind of presence on screen, particularly during the studio era in the Hollywood. So there is this terminology that is used by Daya and thereafter by so many film scholars, charisma. And this is a term that we are quite familiar with, very charismatic. But what is that in real terms? How can we define charisma? Also, a word that comes from the 1920s, poetic movement, poetic realism, and in France, photogeny, means that somebody can be incredibly photogenic. So in certain interviews, Madhuri mentions predictions that she is considerably photogenic. Also, people who really transform, this is the quality of transforming for a camera so that you look more attractive or appealing through the device of the cinematic apparatus. So photogeny is basically looks, visuals, and phonogeny is your voice. Might be certain voice stars, and we know about Benedict Cumberbatch and his very famous voice. I mean, he can just introduce himself in terms of his voice, and we know who it is. Similarly, of course, with Amitabh Bachchan, what was interesting is that he makes his debut as a photogenic kind of a star, not star, he was just an actor then. This was in one show in 1969, where he's actually a voice narrator. But thereafter, the voice becomes so heavily laden with meaning and value. And, if it is his voice, Bachchan's voice, then, it adds a certain kind of a value and, a certain kind of, value system that is structured around his voice. He's well known for being the narrator of Lagan. And, we as, particularly as followers of Indian cinema, we immediately recognize that deep baritone voice in a very distinctive. Another thing which, of course, in some industries are valued more than others is actual acting ability. And what is the word for this performance? So performance includes various aspects. It's not just how you deliver your lines or how you stand in front of the camera, but it's also your voice, your accent, your modulation, your tone, your facial expressions, your mannerisms, your body movement, your body gestures. There's so many stars who are known for the way they walk or the way they run, or also Cary Grant in Northern Hitchcock, but it was very famous for the way he ran in a very really smooth manner. And also, when you're choosing somebody to play James Bond, that he has to look a certain way, and more than that, it's more photogeny there. But it's all the performance is the word that encapsulates every aspect of that the on-screen life of a star or an actor. So acting talent, absolutely. There's some prodigiously talented, and some who have limited acting skills, but maybe photogenic, and then they get stereotyped. So then, of course, we talk about the range and the versatility of some of these stars. Okay, so quickly, again, just laying the grounds of this field, subfield, which may not be as well known in Indian film departments, film studies departments, all the kinds of star production. And so, because I was, of course, talking about the Hollywood stars, but we have, of course, many stars in our country. So we look at how star is produced, how it is manufactured. So you have star studio dynamics. There might be certain promoted in a certain manner. They all Hollywood studios they had these contracts where they could only work a particular studio, and then they could, with the permission of that studio, had other studios. But they might kind of understand that studio determines their careers, the choice of roles. They sometimes are roles. Production of star vehicles is extremely important in understanding dancing star. Obviously, song and dance sequences or song and dance spectacles or picturizations are star vehicles, and are comic slapstick roles. Comic spaces are for Sridevi, her peer contemporary. So you have certain vehicles that launch a star. Also, someone like Hrithik Roshan, of course, it's similar thing, dancing and action star. So also very much a photogenic kind of. So you see Ginger Rogers and Fred Astaire, and that is, of course, they're so famous for their tap dancing numbers. So the tap dancing numbers would be the star vehicles, and you would just go from one tap dancing ensemble kind of a spectacle to another. And that's what they were so famous for. Actor pairings, of course, like Anil Kapoor and Anil Kapoor and Madhuri. So many we can think of. Actor filmmaker pairings are also extremely important. Certain filmmakers tend to cast the same actors. Like if you're aware of Ingmar Bergman, he had a repertory company of actors, so he would go back to the same actors and actresses, his muses, Harriet Anderson, Liv Ullmann, etc., etc. So they have a certain understanding over a period of time cast each other. I mean, work with each other. So unlike Wonka, if you're interested in Hong Kong cinema, he would like to work with Tony Leung. Tony Leung features in this Star series by VFX. So you have, of course, collaborators. I will be talking much more about that. It's such a fundamental aspect in the, in sculpting the stardom of Madhuri Dixit. Talent agencies and agents, mentors, managers, secretaries. Now, this is an area which Star Studies has not focused on as much. So I have tried to, add a little more to the role of, say, the manager. In the case of Dixit, of course, Rakesh Nath plays a very important role. Rikuji, managers, secretaries who might become managers or known as managers, mentors play an extremely important role, which is what I've tried to highlight. So these are certain areas in Star where I've tried to, which are under written, or there's neglect in scholarship. And so this is what one can do. This is one of the typologies. There are various kinds of typologies, but this is just referencing a very well-known scholar, Christine Geraghty, and her book, Reimagining Stardom, from 2000. And you can come up with several different kinds of ways in which you can categorize stars. Stars as celebrities, stars as professionals, stars as performers. Basically, according to her, there are some stars who we know not so much in terms of their roles, or their screen, screen avatars or screen life, but more so the kind of life that they lead, all the things that they do off screen. So their off screen lives play as important a role or more important a role than what they actually do on screen, the kind of roles that they take. So somebody like Angelina Jolie would be very much a star as a celebrity. We don't think of her as a great accomplished star in terms of acting, in terms of performance. And stars as professionals is somebody who is known in terms of the work that they do on screen, but they don't have the range of stars as performers. So professionals are people who are typecast. They're very well known for doing a certain kind of role. Harrison Ford or Whoopi Goldberg. They're known for being, say, in comic roles, usually in comic roles, as with the case of Whoopi Goldberg, or action. If you're thinking of Sylvester Stallone, you're not going to cast him in a comedy, something like that. Not in the peak of his career. He's known very much as this action star of the 80s, this brawny musculature which has been imitated over large parts of the world. And star as performers is what we think of as somebody who should have a great range, versatility. Meryl Streep, Dustin Hoffman, Naseeruddin Shah, if you're acting, he's a star, but maybe a lot of people think that he's still a character actor. But someone who just has an enormous amount of versatility and range. Sometimes he or she comes from theater, but it's not typecast. They can do a number of roles. So that's just one typology of stardom. And then, of course, in our industries, there's something very distinctive, and those are singing stars and dancing stars. And dancing stars is obviously where Madhuri sets the bar very high, and even now she is known as the celebrity judge of dancing shows. And so this is Professor Nika Mojumdar, who's written this key work on 1930s to 50s female stars. She shows in Indian cinema. Because there are these dancing stars who, of course, have to act, and also singing stars initially, like Kishore Kumar and things like that. And so that is a particular kind of characteristic of the Indian film industry. I'll talk much more about zeitgeist icons, which I think Madhuri is somebody who captures the spirit of her time, the era, all the contradictions, all the dualities, all the aspirations of the 1990s, early 1990s, late 1980s. And also you have transnational stars. I don't know if you recognize, he's a Korean star, the picture of this person. If you watch K-drama, Lee Byung-hun, he is a really good example of a transnational star. Of course, he's a massive star in South Korean industry. But he's also started, he appears in certain action blockbuster films in Hollywood, like Magnificent Seven and Red and Red 2 and all of that. So he's typecast definitely as a transnational star. He has been able to kind of move among various different industries, which is incredibly difficult to do. Of course, most of whom it's Priyanka Chopra, I suppose, who you would see as very much a transnational star, and also transmedia star because she, was on television in the US. So approaches, there are several approaches that you can take to the study of stardom, and there are enormous number of theories, film theory plus performance theory. And then there's an economic approach. We look at it in terms of consumption and commodities and how how they kind of plug into a capitalist society. So they are icons of consumption and commodities. We consume them as audiences, as fans, as and they also benefit from. Obviously, they benefit greatly to branding now, and having a distinctive kind of persona. An industrial approach, which is what I assume, which is an approach that is used. You can do a multiple approach as well. So stardom as labor. We talk about all the work, actual work that goes in. Stardom as stars as workers, because they, at the end of the day, they're not doing it for free. There's an enormous amount of transaction of capital, and some would argue a disproportionate transaction of capital that goes on with stardom, and particularly also celebrity. If you're looking at football stars, like Messi, and the contractual nature, but they are very much laborers in that way, but obviously handsomely paid in terms of their labor. And so then, of course, a very popular approach is gender and sexuality. You look at representations of masculinity, representation of femininity. How does Hrithik Roshan represent a certain kind of masculinity, a transnational masculinity, or say Vidya Balan represents a particular kind of femininity, in terms of her body type, her kind of choice of roles. All of that, and then gender stereotypes. How many of them actually break the stereotypes, and they carve out a niche for themselves, or they actually explore the full range of their acting talents and skills. And there's a lot that is being written on star bodies. And then you can look at it from a perspective of race, class, caste, region, national identity, and etc., etc. So there's been quite a bit of work in terms of whiteness in Western scholarship of film studies. The representation of whiteness among certain kinds of, in particular, with Nicole Kidman. And also in terms of class, like class plays an extremely important role in understanding the Madhuri Dixit text and how the phenomenon of her being very rooted to her Maharashtrian middle classness, which she constantly talks about. Okay, and then you have audience and reception study. So you basically have, surveys, you make surveys or questionnaires, and you ask fans, just people who are not fans, critics, as large, find audience, what the audience make, and you'll find very different kind of contradictory responses often, which makes it so fascinating. And reception, that is kind of allied. Fandom also. Fandom is a massive area of study, not just for stars, but fandom of certain franchises, fandom of horror particularly. So these are certain approaches in film studies, and methodologies are textual analysis are very, very, very famous, kind of overt now, textual analysis, where you look at the style and form and tone also. You could, of course, do archival research, and encourage that. If it's a historical figure, somebody who was a star, say in the 1950s or 60s, you have to go into the archives, look at extra filmic materials like publicity and promotional materials, look at primary and secondary interviews, and posters. Reviews are extremely important. You might find some biases in reviews of a particular reviewer or a critic. Gossip, scandal, and rumor. This is what Dyer has talked about and says it's extremely important in the construction of an image of a star, that you have to analyze gossip and scandal and rumor. And doesn't matter the veracity, it actually exists. If there is any kind of veracity to it, authenticity to gossip, just the fact that there is a certain amount of gossip around a star leaves a certain imprint. May not be indelible. That's the thing. Some people, it can really sink their careers if it is negative gossip or scandal or rumor. But for some, they can transcend, temporal gossip, things that don't last. They transcend that. But that's also very interesting to study. How some can transcend negative, gossiping and mongering. Some don't. So we look at film magazines, and in the sphere of Indian film studies, we look at movies, cinemas, star and style, screen, film fair, and of course now we have to add that dimension, that is social media and all of the new media theory that is emerging, which and kind of looking at a lot. Besides audience and about 5 aspects of my book, and I don't want to ramble on, as concise as possible. We focus on and who are in this subfield of star studies and looking at the manufacturing stardom. Suddenly there is romanticization about stars. That overnight somebody appears as a glittering star in the firmament. There is a construction process that goes on, and it is hard work. And there is a manufacturing of that stardom that happens. And it is not by fate or by magic or by luck. I mean, some of that does happen, but it is a very thoughtful process of trying to, engender a star, seeing early signs of potential, and also some amount of luck to be able to work with certain people. But the industrial approach to stars is not talking about just destiny and fate and all that, but it is very careful process, very painstaking, laborious process of star making that I'm talking about. And she, after she has completely confirmed as the superstar of the 1990s, she talks about how hard it was for her to work on her appearance, on her looks, on her. It feels, in hindsight, it feels fairly strange and hard to believe somebody honesty and was right at the beginning was not having all of the any of the components. So I talk to emphasize on male mentors, which then this is an approach that is not used much. The approach that is very commonly used is looking at stars in what role they have played. So I look at, I emphasize male mentors like Subhash Ghai, the Kapoor brothers, Bonnie Kapoor, Anil Kapoor, and look at the secretary, his role, very valuable role, and also of course a person who has left has created her image. Saroj Khan, as we know, passed away recently. Just costuming, her looks, facial expressions, obviously her body movements. You see two screen grabs in Saroj Khan's academy, where you can see the mudras. She's trying to teach Madhuri the basics, of considered to be a natural dancer. But Saroj Khan sort of sculpted her star persona dancing star through all the choreography that she did. So there is an emphasis on all of this, negotiating the hierarchies of power and influence and various men, because it is such a patriarchal industry, the sites of power tend to be located in powerful men. And so it also emphasis on creative labor, the amount of retakes, and that comes out in just talking to, interviewing a lot of people, also reading very carefully, as many interviews as the person has given, the star has given. So there's an overriding emphasis on her professionalism, the number of retakes she used to to give a number of rehearsals, that she would be an absolute perfectionist, that very much the emphasis on discipline, dedication, work ethics would just be a discourse, a constant repetition, not just from her, but also from her peers or people who worked with her, even right up to 2014 in Gulab Gang, that she would get up early in the morning, and there is a certain kind of commitment to her craft, which is part of who she is. And also the various industrial practices at that point in time. This is the late 80s and early 90s, where there would be multiple films that she would be shooting, and the compromises that she would have to make. Sometimes there wouldn't be, most of the times there wouldn't be any script as such, or the script would be made up. This is another significant aspect I just want to quickly talk about, kind of a split on-screen persona, that she had this unique ability to reconcile the on-screen seductive aspects of the star persona with a rather wholesome, good girl image, off-screen image. And that is, I think, contributes greatly to her lengthy career and the way in which she, tried to protect her moral reputation, the way she handled all kinds of, rumor mongering and spacious, discourse in the media. So what has helped, and this is not just my understanding, is a concern of people, is the way in which she has used her outsider status to explain any kind of part of misunderstandings, that she keeps repeating this over and over again, how she comes from a non-film family, that she she comes from a very traditional middle class Maharashtrian family, that she has all those family values intact. She also talks about her class, being middle class. She's, she did not come from a family that actually pushed her into this industry, compared to many of her other peers like Sridevi, who started working as a very, very young child artist. There's a constant repetition about her education, or a perception that she had academic inclinations. So these are the kind of markers of respectability that have carried her career through, and have made her, this kind of vamp. So many careers of women have ended because they're just tilted balance. They have, or circumstances have come together, stereotype, but she has always been able kind of find balance. And that was the question, how she managed to do that. And people keep, two scholars referring to her middle classness and education. So that is the screen. Very boring. I use boring because that is the word that is used by her, and also people who try to interview or cover her during that period of the late 80s and 90s. That she gives fairly standard copy, that boring, monotonous. She says the same things over and over again. She has a very consistent off-screen persona, as opposed to this very fairly raunchy, sex appeal that she and Saroj Khan kind of manufacture in the way in which she moves her body. And some of the dance vocabulary is taken from the vamp. That is the argument that many of the scholars make, along with I make the same argument. Just here in 2015, she talks about how she's using the dance vocabulary that typically vamps would use. But then the heroine's dance vocabulary expanded. There was a blurring between the chaste heroine and the seductive vamp, and so that would merge a great deal. And so this was the on-screen dichotomy, the on-screen, off-screen, boring off-screen personality versus the very raunchy, sexy on-screen persona with these Choli Ke Piche, and then a lot of other films, Tezab, Ek Do Teen, and all of that. So I believe that she managed, mediated scandal and very well. She would always change the topic. She never got any scandals. That she would constantly hark back to the fact that she was a very disciplined, responsible being, a very good daughter, and that she would, as they started realizing fairly quickly, that she was taking scandal in her stride with a shrug of her shoulders. That is just quotation in various magazines. And this is the construction of star persona is relational. If all your peers have much more colorful off-screen lives, then that star's persona, off-screen persona will seem dull or will seem boring. And I think that really helped her because she had an absolutely consistent kind of, with one or two scandals, which I think she handled quite well. But, if you think about all of her other peers, they are up here. They were far more westernized in some ways, while she was quite traditional. She would always usually wear salwar kameezes in the house. She was very modest and humble. She did not splurge as such. There was never any kind of diva-esque kind of reports of her throwing tantrums as compared to some of her other peers. And another thing is, I mean, there's so much here. Media discourse is, of course, these manufactured antagonism between Sridevi and Madhuri. And you see this right throughout in 87, and then in the middle as well. Sridevi's out, Madhuri's in. They keep on doing this. The press, it's almost like trolling in what people face in Twitter, but constantly pitting the two against each other, and they really never met. And if you look at and you read Madhuri's responses, she doesn't ever indulge in any kind of mudslinging, she manages so-called rivalries very well. Also, there is a certain dignity and a distance that she maintains. There's a certain kind of a very formal demeanor that she adopts when she's talking about any of her rivals, say even Jaya Prada or Ravina Tandon or later on Aishwarya Rai. She doesn't engage in any kind of muckraking at all. So what struck me as quite surprising, because of the years of research that I've done and been through quite literally hundreds of magazines, interviews and newspapers and all that, is just the barrage of negative press that she received. Right from the beginning, from 84 to about, I would say, when Hum Aapke Hai Kaun became this massive successful film, this all-time blockbuster in 1994. So around about for 10 years, it would be, I'm just reading what is here, and this is just, I would say this is just 1% of what was written about her, which, one doesn't expect this kind of negative press when one thinks of Madhuri Dixit, because if you look at her Twitter handles and the responses, she's one of the most popular. There are very little polarizing, demeaning comments that she receives on, certainly if you follow her on Instagram or Facebook. But this was remarkable that she survived this for such a long time, until there was, I see a slight shift in the discourse in 1994, and thereafter the press latch on to something else. So I'm just reading this Star and Style 1987. It's going to take Feroz a lot of hard work to make Madhuri look seductive, and there were a lot of other more damn comments about her. A slip of a girl, thin, dusky, hesitant smile, 1989. Madhuri Dixit was at once befundingly ordinary and uncanny. And then that was 1992 Filmfare, and then 5 years later, she gives an interview to the same scribe, and she says, behind my back, it would be said that I'm not heroin material, that I'm too thin and ordinary. I would be told to put on weight, to drink gallons of tonic and pop vitamin pills. There were suggestions that I could get my teeth done and my nose set right. I mean, it's quite remarkable that now she is considered to be, the icon of beauty, particularly, I mean, people aspire to look like her in her 50s. The way she's conducted herself right throughout, you wouldn't realize that there was so much of vitriol about her. One was to just, go very quickly. One was about her appearance and that she did not look a certain way. Two was that fact that she had the audacity to challenge the #1 position that Sridevi held for quite a long time. And three was the choice of her roles, that she was being naive, she was making too many mistakes, and that she was letting her secretary take too many decisions. So these were basically the three kinds of categories in which the media fell, apart from the fact that she was constantly pitted. And that continues right throughout, I think, in most industries. They create rivalries and rivals. Okay, and then Madhuri Dixit as a zeitgeist icon, this is a quotation that they tend to resonate at certain particular moments of historical crisis or question. They offer up ideologies, emotions, sensations, informing subjectivities that are able to manage or assuage the tensions of historical crisis. So the argument is that she's both a product and a reflection of our times, mirroring the gender tensions of globalization, because remember 1992, 1991, 92 was when there was economic liberalization, and then, the mediascape just completely transformed. And also, of course, of class and a certain kind of tensions of global modernity, because Indian culture was seen as under tremendous threat from globalization and economic liberalization. So she seemed to be somebody who represented a continuation in traditional family values, particularly in 1994 with Hum Aapke Hai Kaun, a way in which to reassure large numbers of the class that everything was okay in India, that it was not undergoing these massive transformations in every sphere, in economy, in the politics, in the media, popular culture, and of course the media. Also, what you see here is she's a zeitgeist icon because she captures the spirit, and she benefits from certain changes that take place at this point in time. And apart from the fact that urban middle class women identify with her song and dance sequences of certain kind of agency that they enjoy in her, which they perhaps lacked in their own lives. And also she offered a kind of possibility that she could do it all and have it all. But she also benefited from a certain change in the audiovisual technology. There was a boom. There was VCRs and VCP technology at this point in time, which you see mentioned textually in Hum Aapke Hai Kaun. There was a different kind of an engagement with the star, a far more intimate. Stop and rewind, pause, freeze frame, and watch your favorite star over and over again. Particularly also during this point in time, there was the video cassette boom. There were video cassette parlors at this point in time. There was the dominance of computerization because of these satellite channels, new satellite private cable channels, Star TV and Subhash Chandra's ZTV. And so you would have a lot of song-based programs, and song-based programs need content, and that's where her song picturizations played an extremely important role. You watch them at this point in time. This was new, that you watch them almost on a loop over and over again. You would watch them, and they fill up a lot of time, like what we have in news now, 24/7. You need stories, and sometimes you concoct. So things like Ek Do Teen, Tama Tama Loge, Choli Ke Piche, Dhak Dhak, Aakhiyan Milao, these were just primed to be played on television. So the more you saw her, the more on screen all the time with various kinds of film-based programs, the more she kind of developed as a dominant star of the 1990s. But because she was such a dancing star, that helped enormously. So I'm just going to mention some of these film-based programs, many of which are defunct now. Superhit Mukabla, Philips Top 10, BPL OA, Saregama, which has a different avatar now, 1995 to 2005, Meri Awaaz Suno, Antakshari. And you also have MTV India. At one point, remember, it wasn't as Bollywoodized. It didn't have as much film-based song and dance from Hindi cinema. It would have a lot of songs from the US, but then it became, towards the late 1990s, it became heavily dependent on for song and dance from the film industry. And also this was the reign of music directors like Bapu Lahiri and Amin Malik. So this is the last final aspect of the book that is still ongoing, and my book sort of ends with 2014 actually, with Gulab Gang and Deri Shikya, and then a little bit afterwards. But this is ongoing, the way in which she has been able to, I would say, fairly successfully reinvent herself for a new generation, for the Gen Zs, for the millennials, for a younger audience, people who don't remember her debut in Abode and then all her hits. She's used reality television as a very good way, a platform to reintroduce herself, as well as to make older generations remember her. So very much built around the cult of the dancing star and her personality. Also Hindi and Marathi films, Total Dhamal, I think she's done one last year, and then of course Deri Shikya and Bucket List. She's moved into Marathi films now, and also Marathi kind of production. Of course, she has a definite presence online, Instagram. She has this Dance with Madhuri kind of a portal, television adverts, philanthropic work. So basically, the longevity depends upon transmedia reinventions, not just that you will continue to just be a star, but you'll turn into a celebrity, where you have various different realms and aspects, dancing at award shows, fashion shows, doing charitable work, working with the UN for child's rights, labor rights, coming up with songs and a particular dance for diabetics, a lot of other kinds of extra textual work that she has done, which has really transformed her into a celebrity on par with, even I would say even the female kind of Amitabh Bachchan. That is the key, to be able to constantly be relevant and connected with the audience and viewers and spectators across time, across class, caste, and to a certain extent region also. So I'll conclude with just the fact that I continue to work in stardom, but I've written on Vidya Balan, that was a peer-reviewed journal article, and then more recently on Sridevi also. So I thank you for your attention, and I look forward to some of your questions.
Now I request Debolina Basu, Faculty Journalism, Department of Journalism and Mass Communication, to please conduct the question answer session. And all the students and participants are requested, if you have any question, kindly you can write in the chat box or you can directly ask back. Debolina, please.
Thank you to Dr. Nandana Bose for this informative and knowledge empowering session. So our chat box has been flooded with questions. Our first question is from Srinjoy Das. She has asked, we have seen Nargis as the protagonist in the movie Mother India, which was our first entry to Academy Awards, but has the female-centric movies been reduced, or rather the recent movies having male protagonists mainly?
Well, if you look, it depends upon multiplex cinema. Looking at blockbusters, I think there are a range of different kinds of cinema now. If you're looking at Vidya Balan films, absolutely not. She can carry a film, and consider to be, particularly with Kahani. That's why I've written on Vidya Balan that even though her latest film I wasn't particularly impressed with, but just the fact that she can helm project and distributors will distribute it, she'll get the money. Of course, it helps that she is connected with Siddharth Roy, and his whole studio. But I don't think it has been reduced. There's a Thappar. I can't imagine in the 1990s a Thappar, releasing early 1990s or late 80s. So I'm very optimistic, and I don't think it has been reduced. But certainly, certain blockbusters make women feel as if they are just an adornment, and they are just there as mannequins and looking for. But I think the range of cinema is promising. Whether it's theatrically released or on streaming. I think streaming has great potential for female subjectivities to be represented, and you have somebody like Radhika Apte, whose name is now synonymous with Netflix, of course, as you know. But I'm fairly optimistic that I don't think it has been reduced as such.
Thank you, ma'am. Our next question is from Samarpita Banerjee. Have the stars taken their status for granted nowadays? Is there a divide between newcomers and well-established stars? If yes, then why?
Yeah, that goes back to the structure, the fairly feudal structure of the. I'll just talk about the Hindi film industry because that's what I have been, observing for many, almost decades now. But there is a definite feudalism. They have incorporated certain aspects of a corporate business culture, but then I think they don't work. I mean, if you look at the trajectory of Madhuri's career and the struggles that she's been through, you would, I mean, I don't know if it's, it's just a series of flops that she had. The same with Vidya Balan. And they did not give up. They believed, or they had people who believed in them and their potential. And now we see that when they become a viral sensation, you are correct to a great extent. I think that perhaps because they have certain number of followers, they believe that they have already become stars. Maybe the parameters of stardom has changed, and that's something to think about. And maybe books will come out about what is stardom now? How do we measure stardom? Is it the number of fans on Twitter? Is it the number of promos? Is it the number of reviews that they get? Somebody like Sara Ali Khan or Janvi Kapoor, even before they make films, are stars. Even before, a priori almost. Whereas Madhuri and Vidya Balan have had to work incredibly hard and have had an enormous amount of struggles, and they've both been outsiders. And just the fact that they never gave up, and I still think their potential is untapped because of the 80s and the 90s, the kinds of stories that they were given, and maybe when in the years to come, they will find meteor projects. But even with Shakuntala Devi, or I can't think of a late 80s or 90s where you just have commercially released films. Where there were so many people who are really excited. There is a hype around a film by Vidya Balan, that we know that there are certain kinds of things we'll expect from her. And so I do think to a certain extent it is being taken for granted because the parameters, I think, may have shifted. That it doesn't matter if you're an excellent performer. I don't want to use the word acting, because performance is a lot more than just acting. But it's maybe not anymore rooted in the kinds of films they do, but the amount of celebrity, clout that they have, influence that they have, I think. That's an excellent thought-provoking question. To an extent, yeah, probably the younger generation seem to think that if they have a certain millions of fans, they've made it. And then, they may not be able to handle, failure and things like that.
Now, moving on to our next set of questions. This has been asked by Shayondeep. What kind of economic reforms forced open the market for Indian films? What kind of transformations have the promotional techniques undergone? There are basically two questions. The first part of
yeah, got it. Yeah. So economic transformations is, that you could have a lot more multinationals, banks who could actually invest. Now, this is all on paper, but there has been certain kinds of consolidation of studio that is not so much tied to black money, black economy, the diamond industry, the so-called mafia, or the money from the Middle East. They've tried to, in order to be able to attract talent and interest and financiers from around the world, they had to kind of become more transparent in their accountancy, the kind of ledgers that they hold. Before, there wouldn't be much, there wouldn't be that many chartered accountants, and to show where the money has gone. But even having said that, there's a lot of, I believe, that's a very tricky question to ask. You ask them where you're getting your finance from. But the economic liberalization ideally wanted, and also this goes with the 1997 giving the business of entertainment and industry status. They wanted more banks, more clean money to enter. And I think maybe that has happened. So nobody will actually tell you, openly. All the fieldwork that I've done, they say that it's cleaner money, much cleaner. Promotionals have. I highly recommend this book by Ashwin Punathambekar. He talks about from Bombay to Bollywood. He talks about just that is one aspect of the exhibition and the marketing, publicity, promotions that has completely been overhauled. You have a division of labor for everything, a specialization that was never there, before. There's a clear division. when you institute certain policies, it takes maybe a decade for it to actually trickle down. So now in 2020, you see just the hype, the generation of hype that you see. It's very similar to what Hollywood did in the 50s, 40s, 50s, 60s, and now we're kind of in many ways catching on. And in terms of just publicity, a lot more corporate interest. That's where corporatization has come in with, with people with MBA degrees, going into manufacturing certain kinds of, going into design, graphics, the publicity, promotional kind of wing. Some have just that now, and some have hire people just for new media. A fairly young crowd, of how they can popularize the brand. There are brand managers. It's just massive overhauling. The emphasis seems to have gone there. And then again, I come back to streaming and Netflix. The budgets for advertising, and you see those large hoardings. I believe for Sacred Games, it was about 5-6 crores that Netflix, it comes out of their own budget. That's why producers are so eager to work with Netflix and Amazon Prime, because all of that is just taken care of. All the publicity, the hoardings, billboards, constant adverts through your social media channels. It's a massive field. Excellent question again.
The next question is again from Srinjoy. She has asked, performance makes a star. Does this statement hold true in the current scenario?
Yeah, no, yeah, it should. That is the ideal, of course, as we know. But whether it was ever true, if you think of Greta Garbo and Marlene Dietrich, they weren't great. They didn't have great range of performance. Like say with so many. I mean, that is ideally probably, if you're very idealistic, you think, yeah, stardom should actually depend on the talent of that human being, or whatever that talent, or the voice, the way they speak. But for our industry, it seems to be photogeny, I think. Photogeny, I mean, our industry as in the Hindi, which is one of many. But again, I would say that performance is relevant to certain kinds of cinema. We have so many types of cinema, films, and so if you're, where do you place your value? Is it the multiplex films? Is it the films that are now being made for Netflix? Is it the big blockbusters where it is mostly how attractive somebody is, and you don't really care about the performance, but you do care about performance in smaller budget films with author backed, script backed films, like maybe I go back to Kahani, where performance, it makes all the difference. And I think that is something we will always seek. Good performers should become great stars. But even in the 1970s, you wouldn't see a Nasruddin Shah, who had such a range, Shaban Azmi, Smita Patil. They would not be the star. But in their world, if you valued art cinema, if you valued parallel cinema, then you didn't care about other people who were making their names because of how attractive they were, and not because of their performance as such. So again, it's a very divided kind of a scenario we see. There are so many types of kind of cinema. But that is our aspiration, I think. That's the ideal, that stardom should be determined by the quality of the performance.
Now moving to our next question. This is asked by Astha Kumari. Does Indian film industry have a new wave in the true sense of the term? How much have the Indian audience accepted the art films or films other than the commercial movies?
Yeah, new wave in, yeah, that's complex question. Now, some would say that we are in the middle of some sort of a wave where we see a smaller budget, films that offer the various kinds, different kinds of genres that we're seeing, horror comedies, and a far more visceral. I'm again talking about depends. Of course, there isn't that much censorship, but with Netflix and things like that, something like Patal Lok, I mean, of course, that's a series. Of course, and then you have Bulbul. Would Bulbul have a theatrical release or that kind of a response if it hadn't been released on Netflix? That's difficult to say. But I mean, new wave. Yeah, I mean, it's difficult. A new wave is when a kind of some number of filmmakers sort of come together and they have some sort of a manifesto. I mean, that's the kind of ideas of a new wave that happens. Say the French new wave, the Japanese new wave, or the Korean new wave. It's usually a particular time, and absolutely there are massive transformations that are happening as a result of this opening up of a third space, which is streaming, OTT, and all of that. But are they all coming together in quest of something? Is there a common goal, a manifesto? Are they united in bringing about change? It is too fragmented industry, I would say, to actually think of a new wave. But in terms of technology, I think technology is aiding some kind of transformation. So I would say not a new wave, but there are definite transformations, many more. And I look at gender all the time. So many more women ADs, more female scriptwriters who are now getting their credit. Scriptwriters and singers. These are the areas where this massive copyright infringement and intellectual copyright barely exists. But female scriptwriters that we are identifying, somebody like Anvita Dutt, and there's animation with Gitanjali Rao. There's just so many female producers. I'm very excited by the rise of female producers. That there are erstwhile stars who have made enough capital, who are investing money into projects that are interesting and often foreground the female voice, the female perspective, the point of view, which previously male producers probably would not. It was always known that if you have a film revolving around a woman, it would not succeed. You would have to have multi-starrers, and most of them would have been men. And the women would sing and dance. Now there is a definite shift, I would say. I wouldn't call it a wave as such, a new wave, but definite transformations in the industry, and I think positive transformations of many more female talent coming in I'm not talking about acting, which I think is the most hereditary, the most dynastic, but script writing, cinematography, and then some of them are for a certain kind of audience. They don't want that massive, 100 crore, whatever. It's for festival films, perhaps, or it's for people who are of a certain inclination, background. It's very difficult to talk about audiences in India because it's so fragmented again. It's all fragmented in terms of region, class, caste, language, all of that. But absolutely, I think there is a transformation that is happening. And in terms of gender, the number of films that you see from a female perspective, and there is an audience, which is what I think streaming is tapping into. Of course, again, a very urban, fairly privileged group of people who can afford streaming in the first place. But instead of a wave, I'll call it definitely a gradual transformation. And I hope it continues because we're in the middle of that. So it's difficult to kind of make predictions.
So we have our last question of the webinar. Has today's audience mixed the concept of idol, star, and celebrity? This is again asked by Asta Kumari.
Yeah, idol is a word that now I only think of in terms of Korean popular culture and Hallyu and the BTS. I don't know if any of you listen to BTS, but the one great song by BTS called Idol. An idol, the matinee idol of Uttam Kumar. What Uttam Kumar was. Idol is no longer. It is archaic word, I think, in our times. That somebody who is an epitome and embodiment of idealization, ideal values. No, definitely that we have lost that. Very rare to come across idol unless you study films on star studies in up until I think the 1980s. Even then, they're not referred to as idols. Definitely, they are referred to that in East Asian popular culture. Idols that move among various media. They can be, as maybe you're aware, there might be K-drama idols, and then they sing also, and then they also act on the big screen. So you have this massive transmedia stardom that they enjoy in East Asia, particularly. I'm mostly familiar with South Korean kind of Hallyu wave idol, and then star and celebrity. Yeah, yes. I would also say that you cannot, in this world, in the world that you have to be so competitive, and I believe it is incredibly cutthroat. I think if you remain a star, you will not be able to survive in this world, and just be a star, which means you're just acting for the big screen. And I think even earlier with Nasruddin Shah or Rawana Azmi, they would have theater. But I understood, and sometimes they would compromise and do films so that they could go back to their true love, their first love, that was theater, because it, of course, as we know, doesn't pay much. But yeah, the distinction between star and celebrity in our lives, you have to be a celebrity, and sometimes it seems you have to be a celebrity first, and that means all of those paraphernalia that oscillates around the star text, and then you come to the films, which is almost becomes an afterthought. So an excellent question, I must say. Ideal, I think, is an archaic word, and there is a more of a blurring of the divisions between stardom and a celebrity. Star, definitely, you have to be a celebrity, you have to be on Instagram and promote maybe a brand of clothing, fragrance. It's the model that Kim Kardashians have introduced, I think. I mean, they are famous for being famous. I don't recall watching any of the reality television, and I think I'm better for that. But that's where the celebrity is coming from. I think it's also imitation of American culture, because you have to be seen in parties, you have to be doing reviews, and certain things that have nothing to do with your life as a actor, strictly speaking. So absolutely, I think it is blurred, and I would also stick my neck out and say it's probably very difficult to just be a star and not move into the realm of celebrity, to be visible. Everybody's craving for visibility constantly. Yeah, excellent question, thank you for that.
Thank you, ma'am. I would request Dr. Polashpriya Haldar to take us through the rest part of the webinar. Thank you.
Thank you, Debolina, and thank you, Nandana ma'am. It was really and very interesting and informative session. And with patience, you answered all the questions very nicely.
Yes,
We thoroughly enjoyed your session. Now, the last
thank you
part of
very
the
much.
session, I would like to request Dr. Shampa Devnath, IQAC Coordinator, Vijaygarh Jyotish College, and also Professor, Department of Microbiology, to kindly give the vote of thanks for today's webinar. Shampali,
Thank
please.
you. Am I audible?
Yes, yes, yes.
Okay. Thank you, Polashpriya. Now we have come to the end of the webinar on female stardom and 1990s Hindi cinema. I have become spellbound by the talk of our honorable speaker, Dr. Nandana Bose, and have also become enriched by a lot of unknown informations from her speech. On behalf of Vijaygarh Jyotish College, Internal Quality Assurance Cell, and the Department of Journalism and Mass Communication, I, Dr. Shampa Devnath, would like to convey warm thanks to our Honorable Speaker for sharing her valuable time with us. I would
Thank you very
also
much, Professor Devnath.
I would also like to thank all the esteemed faculties of other colleges and also of my college and other delegates and the students present in this platform for joining this webinar. I would also like to convey my gratitude to the Department of Journalism and Mass Communication for organizing this webinar on this enchanting topic. I must appreciate Orko and Namrata, the students of this department, for technical support. Last but not the least, I would like to express my heartful thanks to our Principal Madam for her continuous inspiration. Again, thanks to all of you. Good morning, Dr. Nandana Bose, and good evening to all of you. Polish Pia, hello.
Hello? Hello, Sampadi?
Would you like to say something?
Yeah, I would like once again, I would like to convey my heartfelt thanks to our speaker and also to you, Sampadi, for giving such a nice vote of thanks. And today's webinar was really a very enjoyable one, and we all liked it very much. And I would like to invite ma'am in and hope that ma'am will be with us in future also, and we will be enriched by her interesting speech in near future. And today, thus hereby I would like to say that we end our webinar session today
Thank you very much, Dr.
here.
Haldi.
And Anubha, do you like to add anything?
Thank you, Dr. Bose, and thank you, everybody. Today, this is the close session. And thank you once again. Thanks, the speaker, Dr. Nandana Bose. Thank
Thank
you,
you very
madam.
much, Dr. Banerjee. Thank you very much. Thank you so much, everybody.
Recording off, please.